From the White House, switching gears here, where President Donald Trump speaks to reporters in the Oval Office during a meeting with El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele. Let's listen in from earlier.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to have a friend of mine because we went through this together and got along very well for my entire period of time. So I knew him as a very young man. Now he's just a young man. And he's done a fantastic job. Mr. President, it's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
You're doing incredibly for your country. And we appreciate working with you because you want to stop crime, and so do we. And it's very, very effective. And I want to just say hello to the people of El Salvador and say they have one hell of a president. Okay? And I mean that, and I know him well. I know him as a very young man, Marco, even younger than you. You know, he started pretty young.
He'll always be younger.
Young at heart. But I want to thank you for the great job you're doing. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be here in the Oval Office with the President and leader of the free world. We're very happy, and we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we will do it. And we actually turned the murder capital of the world, that was the journalists call it, right? Murder capital of the world, into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. And, you know, sometimes they say that we imprison thousands. I like to say that we actually liberated millions. So, you know, like,
it's very good. Who gave him that line? Do you think I can use that?
Yes. And in fact, Mr. President, you have 350 million people to liberate. Yes. But to liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some. You know, that's the way it works, right? You cannot just, you know, free the criminals and think crime is going to go down magically. You have to imprison them so you can liberate 350 million Americans that are asking for the end of crime and the end of terrorism. And it can be done. I mean, you're doing it already. And I'm sure that people have seen the change in the streets. A long way to go because you're just initiating your second term. But it's clear that, you know, with the numbers at the border, you know, even in Democrat-run cities, they get a help from the work you're doing. So I'm really happy to be here, honored, and eager to help.
Well, we had a terrible thing happen. We had an administration that allowed people to come in freely into our country from not only South America, but from all over the world. Many from the Congo in Africa, Asia, all over the world, Europe, rough parts of Europe. And they came from prisons, and they came from mental institutions, and they came from gangs, and the gangs of Venezuela and other places. And hundreds of thousands and even millions of them came. 21 million people altogether, but many of the people that came, just a tremendous percentage of them were criminals, in some cases violent criminals. We had 11,088 known murderers. Half of them murdered more than one person. This was allowed by a man who, what he did to our country is just unbelievable. So we're straightening it out, we're getting him out. But what they did and what that party did to our country, open borders, anybody could come in. As soon as I heard that, I said, every prison's going to be emptied out into our country. That's what happened. And we're straightening it out. And we just had numbers. We had the highest recruiting numbers in the history of our country going into police departments. And a year ago, we had the lowest numbers. You couldn't hire a
biggest
police.
change. Yeah.
Nobody's
From
ever
the
seen
lowest
it.
to the highest.
And the military now, Marines, the Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, every slot is, I mean, we have the best numbers we've ever had. We call it recruitment numbers. And we've never had anything like it. We had records on at every single level. But very important, the policemen. The policemen are joining forces now that we're having a hard time with policemen because we weren't protecting our police.
Yeah.
And we cherish our police. The police are great, and the firemen and everybody else. But we have the highest numbers that we've ever had, the most enthusiasm. Great enthusiasm, and on trade and other things, we're doing great. We're taking in billions and billions of dollars. We made 2 weeks ago. I gave them a little bit of a pause because you have to show a little flexibility. But we go back to what we have to do. The markets have been very strong once they got used to it. But we were losing $2 billion a day. There's no company big like this. This is the biggest deal ever made. Now we're making $3 billion a day. We're a great country, but we had stupid people running this country, and I can say it. But what they've done to us at the border should never and can never be forgotten. It's a sin, what they did, and you are helping us out, and we appreciate it.
Actually, what you're doing with the border is remarkable. It has dropped, what, 95%? It's incredible.
Okay. As of this morning, 99%, 99.1% to be exact.
Why are those numbers not in the media?
Well, they get out with the fake news, like CNN. CNN over here doesn't want to put them out because they don't like putting out good numbers. They only like putting out because I think they hate our country actually.
Yeah,
but it's a shame. You're right. Isn't that a great question? Why doesn't the media? Why don't they put out numbers?
Yeah, 99%. I mean, it's crazy, right?
We're doing
it's
great.
A crazy turnaround.
Christy, could you maybe say a couple of words about the border? How we're doing?
It's just been absolutely phenomenal what a great leader can do. Clear direction. Our laws matter. We should only have people in our country that love us, and the Border Patrol and our ICE officers and law enforcement officers have done fantastic work. So we're proud of them. Now we just need to get the criminals and murderers and rapists and dangerous gang members and terrorist organizations out of our country. So, Mr. President Bukele, we thank you very much for your partnership. It has been wonderful for us to be able to have somewhere to send the worst of the worst and someone to partner with. And we'd like to continue that partnership because it's been a powerful message of consequences. Mr. President, you wanted people to know that there was consequences if you break our laws and harm our people and endanger families. And this is a clear consequence for the worst of the worst, that we have somewhere to put them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we even had this gang member from Venezuela, one of the ones you sent, and we interviewed him just to get some information, etc. from them. And he said, oh, I got arrested 6 times, but they released me the 6th time, so I should be released again. And then we said, well, what's the last thing you do? And he said, well, I shot a cop in the leg, but I didn't kill him. I just shot him in the leg. And we're like, this guy was arrested 6 times here in the United States, 6 times. He was released 6 times, and in the he was released 5 times, and the last time he was sent to El Salvador, right? So he's not getting released. But the last time he shot a cop, actually, and he shot him in the leg. So these are, like you said, there's something broken.
It's the liberal establishment. But they're not running things anymore in this country, and we're run by, and I don't say conservative, I don't say anything, we're run by people with great common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Because it's all common sense.
Yeah.
It's not liberal conservative, it's common sense.
Exactly.
Do you allow men to play in women's sports? Do you allow men to box your women and box? Because I know you have a lot of boxing.
That's violence.
That's abuse of a woman.
Against women.
It's abuse of a woman. But we have people that fight to the death because they think men should be able to play in women's sports. And some of those sports, it wouldn't matter much, but it still matters. But some of them...
All right, you are listening to the president and also the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, at the White House right now talking about a crackdown on immigration. But as a reminder, don't forget, we also keep an eye on that historic all-women flight to space. That's a Blue Origin flight, and that also includes our very own Gayle King, by the way. But right now, we want to take you back to the White House, that conversation between the president, President Trump, and also Nayib Bukele, president of El Salvador, and also a very testy moment that happened earlier. This was a question about Abrego Garcia. That is the Maryland father who was mistakenly deported to that notorious prison in El Salvador. Let's listen to that.
Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him, President
And
Bukele?
you are doing a great job. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant, because they're totally slanted, because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So we had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
anything
Court's
to get
asking
him back?
to,
And
that-
what was the ruling
that-
in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor?
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele,
Presidente
what is
Bukele?
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's
I mean,
always CNN.
how can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not gonna do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
but you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal,
Yeah,
released into our
I mean,
country.
there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick, these are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago, and they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that?
What's that legal
Why do you
defense
go
as
over and over, and that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
President Trump, thank you so much. How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, you know, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please? As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it because nobody can understand it. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand it. So we have millions of people that should not be in this country that are dangerous. Not just people, because we have people, but we have millions of people that are murderers, drug dealers. They've been allowed to come into our country by other countries that were very smart. When they heard that this very low IQ president, and by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark, and one of the doctors said, sir, I've never seen anybody get that kind of, that was the highest mark. I hope you're happy with that, although they haven't been bugging me too much to take a cognitive, but I did do my physical and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I notice there's no question, so probably you are. But the cognitive, they said to me, sir, would you like to take a cognitive test? I said, did Biden take one? No. Did anybody take one? No, not too many people took them. I said, what about Obama? Did he take one? No, he didn't take one either. I said, let me be the only one to take one. But I've actually taken them 3 times already. I like taking them because you're saying.
All right, you were just listening to the president, President Trump, at the White House there, along with President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, all talking about a crackdown on immigration.